How you doing, everyone? And welcome to Dreadnought, Gundam and more on PS4. And welcome back to the Legendary Journey series, and in part 3 of the Legendary Journey, we will be taking a look at artillery cruisers. Now, artillery cruisers are really interesting. They may not be my favorite ship because sometimes I do get a little bored in the sniper role. But in my opinion, artillery cruisers are the best balanced and most unique of all 5 of the ship classes. The reason being is that they all do a very specific function. On paper, as the game began, they are supposed to be the long-range damage dealers to deal with dreadnoughts. But these artillery cruisers are very excellent and sometimes the only way to deal with tactical cruisers. Really good artillery captains can snipe corvettes, and I dare say that the true prey of all artillery cruisers is probably destroyers and other artillery cruisers, which is quite interesting. Each megacorporation has their own take on artillery cruisers, and each of them is completely unique and different, focusing on various extremes of the artillery cruiser class. This is even more so than destroyers, while still maintaining and staying true to their core principle of doing a lot of damage at long range, particularly spiking damage instead of grinding damage, which you see with destroyers and dreadnoughts. However, there is some nuance to the artillery cruisers. Each megacorporation has a very different style of gameplay, so it's very critical to learn how those artillery cruisers, each of the 3, excel in each of their roles. And also, as you see, some of the best kill scores for any of the players in Dreadnoughts, such as Sharky 1302, Revanite, and so many more, even Just Relentless, who really doesn't play the game much anymore, but was pretty much legendary in his own day. They get some of the best kill scores if the conditions are right. However, the first players that usually rage quit a match are artillery cruisers when faced with deadly corvette captains or being the target of multiple nukes multiple times. Usually you either have the greatest game ever in an artillery cruiser or you have the worst game ever. They are either the kings of the battlefield or the first ones to be the victims. So it's very important to identify your kind of play style and how to survive the battlefield while maximizing your DPS throughout the match. Like with Dreadnoughts, officer briefings will enhance the artillery cruiser's gameplay a little more than some of the other ships, but they're not absolutely critical. And once more is that all 3 of the artillery cruisers have officer briefings that are useful for all artillery cruiser ships. There are a couple of other officer briefings I briefly want to mention here that I found to be particularly useful for artillery cruisers. Something that's useful for all 3 is Destruction Cascade, found on the Aquila Vector Tier 4 Corvette, the Strybog. This is a rival for Glass Cannon. It's not an essential officer briefing, but once you get your damage going, once the kills come flooding in, you find yourself doing excellent damage with Destruction Cascade and Power to Weapons. If you have good defenses and good teammates, it can just start literally a Destruction Cascade, and it's pretty savage. The other one I want to mention for Jupiter Arms and Aquila Vector in particular is the Dreadnought ability, Slow and Steady. You find that on the Aquila Vector Tier 3 Dreadnought. You really want this for Jupiter Arms and Aquila Vector artillery cruisers because they're not losing out on much speed, and it gives them, especially Aquila Vector, a nice 10% pillow of damage resistance. And when you include Engineering 101 and Armor Amplifier, you can have a very close to invulnerable ship for a few seconds, which is really important. For Oberon, I would recommend for your navigation officer briefing Navigation Expert, and that's found on the Tier 4 Oberon Corvette, the Medusa. And that's nice because it's in the same tree. If you get Navigation Expert, you can open up a whole realm of maneuver and flanking possibilities for Oberon artillery cruisers, and I think that's just great. So those are 3 officer briefings to look out for, but you don't need them to play a good artillery cruiser game. and you also have the officer briefings that come with your artillery cruisers, and as we see soon, those will be pretty useful. So, as with other chapters in the legendary journey, when you're taking the legendary journey, it's really from tier 3 to tier 5. You have the Rorik, the Tagurin in the Akula Vector 3 at tier 1, tier 2. You also have Oberon at tier 2, but when we want to actually see the two primary artillery cruisers you're going to be starting out with, we're going to start at tier 3 because that's where you start getting a good feel for the modules that will be available to you, which will be expanded in tier 4, and also the ships start becoming more specialized in tier 3 for their intended role, and that's just great. So first we're going to look at Akula Vector. They are the first artillery cruiser that you come across in the game, but what's really interesting about artillery cruisers is that you don't have to play other artillery cruisers to get that specific artillery cruiser style gameplay. They're so very wildly different that you can just pick them up even if you're not looking to be an artillery cruiser professional in the game of Dreadnought. You can just pick them up in the particular tree that you're focusing most on in the game, and you can pick up how to become a good artillery cruiser in that specific mega corporation artillery cruiser. However, if you are a huge artillery cruiser fan, the three gameplays are so wildly different that it's a nice challenge to have a favorite artillery cruiser and then expand into other artillery cruisers, and Sharky 1302 and Revanite both do this. They started with their favorite style of artillery cruiser, Sharky with Akula Vector, Revanite with Jupiter Arms, and then mastered the other two as well, and they are quite good in all three. So the road to either a professional artillery cruiser or a casual artillery cruiser captain, both of those are roads worth taking. So back to Akula Vector, we have the Rorik and the Tagurin, and then we get to the Vukari, and the Vukari is where you're really first introduced to the tank artillery cruiser. And this artillery cruiser, the entire line is notorious for having a very small hitbox, which means you're extremely hard to hit. Even if you use very flamboyant and exaggerated ship skins, it really doesn't increase your hitbox all that much. It's very negligible, and especially when you're firing at them from head on, they are very hard to hit. And even from the side, if you aim at them, if you're not aiming for the engine block in the back, you will find it very difficult to hit them. So you have that on your side. Besides that, you have some of the best hull for artillery cruisers in the game, and you have very decent firepower. You have very excellent spiking firepower, not as good as Jupiter Arms, and you don't have the DPS that Oberon does, but you're very consistent, and you can still put enemy ships down with the final shot, or you can use the other road to attack with DPS in mind, just putting as many shots into a target as possible as fast as you can without thinking about getting the kill, and that's just great. So when we look at artillery cruisers, we really have two philosophies. The two main philosophies for all artillery cruisers is maximizing your damage or maximizing your survivability, and both of those have their own merits. So let's take a look at the primary module for the Vukari, and it's going to be the same for the other two artillery cruisers. And when we talk about the maximizing your damage, we are really talking about Bomb Catapult. Bomb Catapult will be a staple of yours. You probably want to pick it up for all of your ships, and if you don't use them on your primary build, you are going to use it on your secondary build. They're very effective in very specific circumstances. You can either just throw them out there and see what will happen as far as luck goes, kind of like with a nuke, or you can use them in very specific encounters with heal balls during team deathmatch, or to pin down tactical cruisers that are guarding the command ship in Onslaught. They are kind of easy to see coming, but you will get nice spiking damage with Bomb Catapult, and it does progress well as you increase in tier. It becomes better, and they are pretty darn good. Rapid fire mode is not the best at tier 3, but it's still worth taking, I think. It is pretty good now that some changes were made a couple months ago by the devs, and there is merit behind this module. It's not going to be your primary module. It does get better later on in tiers, but it's interesting to work with. And of course we have siege mode. Siege mode is decent in tier 3, but it doesn't progress well through the tiers, and you will find yourself dropping siege mode. It's novel at first. It does solid damage at lower tiers, but as you climb in tiers, you're going to find siege mode to be a lot less useful. So I don't know that you want to bring that into tier 4, and I don't know that you want to get used to using it, but it's not as bad as many other modules and other tech trees. And then finally we have stasis auto beams, and stasis auto beams is the gateway, the first step in having a defensive artillery cruiser build. Stasis auto beams are very useful. They got me through tier 3 on many of my builds, save Oberon. As far as Aquila Vector and Jupiter Arm, stasis auto beams were a staple for me. They have a very low cooldown, a very long duration. The refire time is pretty darn good, and it just gets better, and the stasis duration is 3.5 seconds. Refire time is 4 seconds, which means that they're going to move just a little, and then you're going to hit them again. It even has damage. It has a decent range, and of course it doesn't completely stop enemy targets yet, but if you do this to a Corvette that's trying to sneak up on you and you have fast enough reflexes, you can drop a mine in their face, or you can turn and shoot them while they're easy to hit. I really like stasis auto beams, and even though they're not as good as other auto beams later on as far as tier 4 and tier 5, I have to say in tier 3 they're just great. So if you want to play defense and not get killed by Corvettes, or even have a secondary build so when you start getting killed by Corvettes you can pull this build out and have some defense, it's really the way to go. As far as secondary weapons, you are going to be starting out with light flak turrets, and they're okay. A lot of people swear by them, but they have a very short range. And I recommend the machine guns, but the machine guns are hard to use. You have to lead with them. The flak turrets are very forgiving, but they have a very short range of 700 meters, so they're useless if a Corvette is even at 800 meters, which is lethal range for them. If a Corvette is at 800 meters, you're in serious trouble. So I started using the machine gun. It has 1,200 meters. So Corvettes that practice staying at 1,100 meters because they're trying to stay out of destroyer flak range, you can still touch them with the machine gun. And it even goes out a little further than that to 1,600 meters, even though it's a little less damage. And that's just great. That is a weapon that gives you the power to fight off Corvettes, but you have to lead with it. It's very unforgiving. You have to get good with it. You have to practice. I recommend the machine gun turrets, but if you're not that good, you can stick with the light flak turrets and beef up other aspects of the Vucari first. Let's take a look at secondary modules. Right here we have Stasis Missile, and Stasis Missile is really darn good, especially at tier 3. This is where you get your first of your status effect missiles. This missile is extremely effective at slowing down fast targets or even slower targets, and it just pins them down just enough for 8 seconds. It has a decent cooldown time of 45 seconds, an excellent range of 13,000 meters, which is just great. It fires 2 missiles in case one of them does get shot down, but remember, they do not stack unless somehow they stagger, which does happen in game once in a while, but usually they hit about the same time, so they won't stack usually, and they come with a little bit of damage, so if you have a Corvette running away with 1,000 health, maybe you can even kill it off. But it's really good, but all these status effect missiles are firmly in the realm of offensive-minded artillery cruisers. It is a decent missile. It's not as good as some other missiles later on, but even some of the greats like Revenite use stasis missiles in tier 5, so it's something to take a look at. Something that's great in tier 3 that's really bad in tier 4, tier 5 is flechette missiles. If you want an anti-Corvette build, you can take stasis auto beams and you can take flechette missiles, and let me tell you, that is an effective way to deal with Corvettes. If they get out of stasis range, you can finish them off with the missiles, or it's a good deterrent. You fire the missiles a lot of times Tier 3 corvettes will run away and get some cover and leave you alone for at least a little bit. They're also really good against larger capital ships like destroyers and dreadnoughts. The problem with stasis missiles is you stasis a dreadnought that's already on top of you, or you stasis beam a dreadnought that's already on top of you. They really don't care. They're going to punch you in the face at close range, and they're going to laugh as they can't move, but they're broadsiding you anyway. So that's something to think about when using stasis. Great against corvettes. It's also great against Oberon destroyers, but not so much against other targets unless you're unharassed. Where flechette missiles in Tier 3 give you an option to do 8,400 damage at decent range. It's 2,400 meters range. That's really good. So it gives you another option. I highly recommend flechette missiles in Tier 3, but afterwards, don't get used to using them because they're really going to fall off in effectiveness. Proximity mines. Let me tell you, I love proximity mines, but I literally cannot count how many times I've been blown up by my own proximity mines. But let me tell you, when you get used to using proximity mines, they are so deadly to corvettes. You stasis a corvette, drop proximity mines in their face, and then do a dive maneuver or an evasive maneuver away, or even throw up your shields or put up armor amp. The proximity mines, 8 out of 10 times, are going to kill especially Jupiter Arms corvettes, but also most other corvettes, or at least put them in a danger zone where you can A, finish them off, or B, they just want to get out of there because they're at like 1,000 or 2,000 health. They just want to leave most times. And proximity mines also do great damage against Oberon destroyers, other ships that get too close, or with Oberon, I've actually snuck up on other artillery cruisers or tactical cruisers with cloaking or with speed and drop proximity mines. They're a lot of fun to use, but nukes will set them off, blast pulse will set them off, or enemy corvettes will set them off. And if you're already taking damage, you're at a quarter health, and the corvette has its shields up and sets off your proximity mines, they're going to kill you. So I have a love-hate relationship with proximity mines. I highly recommend them. So do many other artillery cruiser captains, but they need practice, and you need to be very mindful where these mines are. They do 9,600 damage. That only increases. They have a small blast radius. It's only 480 meters, but that's longer than you think. There's 2 mines, so there's a bit of saturation of area. That's pretty good. You can have 4 max active, which means you can have 1 near you and then drop 1 at a key place. You'll notice in some of my replays I drop proximity mines in specific places like the little tunnel in Kappa Base or the arch in Red Sands. Those are some good places where corvettes like to frequent. I know that because I'm a corvette captain, and it's a nice little surprise. Or you can put 1 to either side of you, or 1 in front of you, 1 behind you. There's a lot of different things you can do with proximity mines. I highly recommend them. We'll get into them a little later too. Drain Missile 3. Drain Missile, like Stasis Missile, is not going to save your life, but it's very useful, especially on offense. It takes down Dreadnought shields, it takes down Corvette shields, it takes down tactical cruiser shields, it takes down everyone's shields and makes it easier to kill them. On defense, if someone gets the drop on you, it's not going to help you all that much. It has a fairly long cooldown. Drain, all drain stuff, of course, was nerfed a few months ago, so the max energy drain is 60. I don't want to say I don't recommend it for Tier 3, for any of the artillery cruisers. It definitely has its uses. There are definitely times I was hit with a drain missile at the worst possible time, and it cost me my life. But you have, as with Stasis Missile, when you use these status effect missiles, you have to be prepared to sacrifice some defense to use them. So let's go take a look at the proximity modules. You start with light auto guns. Light auto guns is really the first module on the tech tree for Tier 3 that I think is total garbage. It's unfortunate that the Vucari starts with them. They will help out against a corvette, but probably not. You'll do a little bit of damage and you'll tickle them, or tickle a bigger ship that gets the drop on you. And you don't have to think about it. You activate it. It works for 38 seconds. It has a monstrously long cooldown, and a pretty poor duration comparatively speaking. It has decent range, it has decent refire time, but really you could do so much better than auto guns. That being said, Just Relentless used to use auto guns along with damage auto beams, and it doesn't sound like it would work well on paper, but if anyone got near Just Relentless, I'm pretty sure Scroat and Persistent Flame are the only two players that wanted to get near Just Relentless. He basically had a porcupine build, and me, Yuls, Mooks, so many players, we just took one look at Just Relentless, and if he had the porcupine build up, we were just like, I don't want to deal with it. I'll go pick on someone else. It's a great deterrent. Really good Corvette captains will not leave you alone, but most will. You use damage auto beams, light auto guns together with proximity mines, and of course armor amplifier later on in tier 4. The porcupine build is a build in which people really want to leave you alone for the most part, but light auto guns isn't going to help with anything larger than a Corvette. They're not going to help with other artillery cruisers. They're not going to help against dreadnoughts. You can do much better. Anti-missile lasers. Ah, geez, look at that cooldown. 80 seconds, duration 43 seconds, number of turrets firing 2. You could do better, and that better is the anti-nuke laser. It has a longer cooldown, but is there really much difference between 80 and 110? Sure, there's 30 seconds, but you really want to be using the anti-nuke lasers because they take care of everything, and they have a really good range, 6,000 meters. They take care of nukes, take care of things. Remember, you're going to be a long range, so things are going to be attacking you from a distance. If a Corvette gets a drop on you with anti-missile lasers and shoves a torpedo salvo in your face, the anti-missile lasers aren't going to shoot them all down before they hit you. So I like the anti-nuke lasers. Activate them when you need them. The problem with anti-missile lasers is you activate them, sure they last for 40 seconds, but you shoot down 1 or 2 missiles and then nothing hits you for 40 seconds, and then you have an 80-second cooldown anyway. So at least with anti-nuke lasers, when you need them, they're there and they work against everything. But I guess both are good for defense. I prefer anti-nuke, but you can go with anti-missile lasers. Disruptor Pulse. Really good in Tier 3. They annoy the crap out of Corvettes, or anything really gets a drop on you. Even a Dreadnought. If a Dreadnought sneaks up on you like a Gravis and you disrupt them for 8 seconds, that's 8 seconds that you and your team can do damage to them, and they can't use their defensive modules. Corvettes can't use their offensive modules. There is something better coming in Tier 4, and we'll get to that in a minute. But for Tier 3, Disruptor Pulse is just fine, but Disruptor Pulse really isn't as useful in Tier 4 or 5. So I give it a medium rating. Let's take a look at the internal modules. We have Stationary Cloak. This is, I don't know what happened with the names here. Remember this, Stationary Cloak is the better of the two cloaks. You can move while using it. It lasts for 18 seconds. It has a 22-second cooldown, but you can shoot with it, and you can't use modules or be hit. But as long as you don't get hit or use another module, you can move around and fire while having a high-quality cloak for 18 seconds. Very good cloaking module. You're probably going to use this on offense or to get away. And the reason why you want to use this to get away is because you can move with it, you can duck out of a Corvette's line of fire, get under him and do a 180, maybe confuse him, hide with the ground clutter, and if he still finds you, you can use some other modules to help defend yourself. But I think it's the better of the two. Mobile Cloak, if you take damage, fire weapons, or use modules, it breaks the cloak, 18-second duration, and a 43-second cooldown with only a medium quality. It sucks. Mobile Cloak sucks. It's the one module that sucks in the artillery cruiser tree. It's really bad. Don't use it. If you're going to cloak, use the Stationary Cloak. Dive Maneuver. Dive Maneuver is great. It's not as good as Evasive Maneuver in Tier 4 or Tier 5, but it's very interesting. It has a fairly long cooldown at Tier 3, but if you go high with the Vukari, and you're hard to hit, very, very hard to hit, especially if you're really high up and you have a very good hitbox angle, you're very hard to hit, you put out some damage, and you have decent hull. As soon as you start taking damage or your shields go away, do a quick dive, recover, rinse and repeat. This is less effective, this tactic, in Tier 4 or 5, but the cooldown does get much better in Tier 5, but it just gets overshadowed by other modules, but really, really good dive maneuver in Tier 3. Less good in space maps like the Rings of Saturn or Ixion, but exceptionally good in Kappa Base, in Space Dock, or in Amarani. Very, very good module to use at Tier 3. So, for the Vucari, we're definitely wanting to go with machine gun turrets. It's your choice whether offense or defense. If you're doing defense, you want stasis auto beams, and of course maybe disruptor pulse. For offense, you never can go wrong from Tier 3 to Tier 5, your entire legendary journey with bomb catapult. Rapid fire mode is pretty good, but there are better modules in my opinion, but there are builds for rapid fire mode, and we may get into that later. And siege mode is decent in Tier 3, but not so good in other tiers. You get your status effect missiles. You either freeze a target to nail it, or take away your target's shields if it's already slow, like a Dreadnought. Proximity mines, really, really good, and they will be really good for the rest of your journey into legendary mode. However, it's a two-edged sword. Your proximity mines can and will kill you, so be prepared for that. Flechette missiles, pretty decent on the Vucari. They get overshadowed in later tiers. Stay away from light auto guns, but disruptor pulse good in Tier 3. You can use anti-missile or anti-nuke lasers. Dive maneuver pretty good. Stationary cloak is exceptional on the Vucari. You can get up high, get up low, shoot your shots. When someone starts firing at you, you can cloak, run away with power to engines, still do a pretty good job. It's decent. So that's the tree for the Vucari. And the name of the game is, you're not the specialist at being a tank yet. That comes in Tier 4. But you can start your road that way and either be offensively minded or defensively minded and do just fine. So, for Tier 3, let's take a look at Oberon. And Oberon started in Tier 2 with the Furia, and now we get to the Virtus. And the Virtus is a totally different animal than the Aquila Vector Vucari. You're still going to want to focus on machine gun turrets instead of flak, but if you use flak because you haven't upgraded to machine guns yet, or you prefer flak, at least the Virtus can counter maneuver against corvettes. You can actually charge a corvette, throw your shields up, and use the light flak turrets more effectively than either of the two artillery cruisers. Bomb catapult is really, really good on all Oberon artillery cruisers, because although bomb catapult works the exact same way at long range as it does on the other two mega corporations artillery cruisers, bomb catapult on the flanking Virtus, where you can use your speed and cover to maneuver to the flanks and launch bomb catapults, especially at other artillery cruisers or destroyers or tactical cruisers. All three of those classes are usually distracted, and if you're not in their front arc or in the same arc as their healing beam, they're not going to see it coming. And that's the problem with bomb catapult. It does so much damage. It has a 1-minute cooldown, but it just stacks so much damage when it hits, especially at medium range, even close range. But if you see it coming, you get out of the way, speed out of the way. But if you use bomb catapult on a slow target from the flank, from the side, where they don't see it coming, and then right when it's about to hit, you open fire on them, it's very, very effective. It's just a colossal amount of damage. I highly recommend it on Oberon because you can flank with it. However, if you get set upon as an Oberon artillery cruiser, stasis auto beams can freeze someone and you can actually get away, especially if you have cloak. You can stasis auto beam, cloak up, run, or you can stasis auto beam and fly circles around them while shooting them, especially against Jupiter Arms corvettes or Aquila Vector corvettes that don't have a means of shooting to the side very effectively or to the back. This is less good against Oberon, because if you freeze Oberon, they're going to shoot you because they have 360-degree guns. But this combos well with the Virtus. Siege mode, not very good on Oberon artillery cruisers at all, because it stops your movement, and you never want to stop moving with Oberon artillery cruisers. I know it's hard to practice to use that way with their guns, but their guns are very forgiving. Their guns do damage broken up over 6 to 8 shots. So if you miss the first couple, you can train your reticle a little differently to start leading or reverse leading your target, depending. You really don't want to stop moving with Oberon artillery cruisers, because if you do, you're made out of glass and they're just going to blow you away. So siege mode is not for you. Rapid fire mode, same problem. Rapid fire mode drains your energy, and you really never want to be without your shields or powered engines with Oberon artillery cruisers. And if you are, you shouldn't be shooting, you should be hiding and regaining that energy. So I really don't recommend siege or rapid fire mode with Oberon artillery. The status effect missiles, like with the Vukari, are just fine if you're offensive minded, and since unlike a Kula Vector where they're slow and tanky, especially if they use slow and steady, you want to be fast with Oberon artillery cruisers. So status effect missiles are very effective because you have another means of escaping danger. But proximity mines are really good too, because now you can drop a proximity mine when a Corvette chases you. I can't tell you how many times I've killed a Corvette by dropping a proximity mine when it started chasing me and flying away from it and shooting backwards. Oh man, it's a beautiful thing. You can set a lot of traps at proximity mines because now you have the speed to get away with Oberon, where you don't with other artillery cruisers from other mega corporations. But if you screw up, you have even less hull to absorb the proximity mines. You're probably going to die. Flechette missiles, again, pretty decent in tier 3, but not decent in higher tiers. Light auto guns, not really good. You have to get too close with the Virtus. It's not worth it because there's other things you could be doing if you get close and ballsy with the Virtus. And if you're far away, what good is it going to do? And if a Corvette gets the drop on you, at least you can fly and do circles and maneuver and shoot 360 degrees with your artillery guns and fight it off. The light auto guns aren't going to help. You can use anti-nuke lasers, anti-missile lasers, or disruptor pulse. Disruptor pulse is pretty good, has a decent range, but again, it falls off in tier 4, tier 5. Mobile cloak, stay away from it. It sucks. It's just not good. Stationary cloak, now you have the speed to get away with this thing, and you can still shoot. So if a Corvette, you see him coming towards you, you cloak up, and then you dive into the canyons of Elysium or the canyons of Amirani, and maybe they lose sight of you for a second, and just when they pick you up again, you fly underneath them or fly in a weird angle and start shooting them, and you're still cloaked and you're still very disorienting for them. I highly recommend stationary cloak. Dive maneuver, not so good on the Virtus, but it can be used effectively if you really want to, but I recommend just using Oberon speed to dive. So not as recommended as with other artillery cruisers. Dive maneuver is there for you, but Oberon doesn't enjoy the benefit as much. So, unlike other ship classes with artillery cruisers, since they really start out at tier 2 with Oberon and they started tier 1 with Akula Vector, unlike many other classes, you don't have to wait to tier 4 to get your third company ship. In fact, once you get the Trafalgar, the tier 2 destroyer for Jupiter Arms, you can get into the Ballista, and the Ballista at tier 3 is some kind of good. Let me tell you, the Ballista is a great ship. You can use the machine gun turrets, the flak turrets. You're even slower than other ships. Believe it or not, you're slower than Akula Vector. Akula Vector has more hull, slightly faster speed, but it doesn't have the firepower. You're very squishy, just barely not as squishy as Oberon. You're the second squishiest artillery cruiser. You're kind of easy to hit at certain angles. Certain angles you still have a slim profile, other angles you do not. It's really that fat gut underneath the bridge. Your nose is pretty hard to hit, your tail's pretty hard to hit, but at certain angles, that midsection where you have that little pot belly underneath the ship is pretty easy to hit. So you want to start engaging things at longer ranges if at all possible. So I recommend the machine gun turrets, but you start with flak turrets. you have siege mode and you're not moving very fast, so when you start out with siege mode, it's not that bad. Rapid fire modes is okay. I highly recommend stasis auto beams. If someone gets the drop on you, you're absolutely dead unless you take action. So using stasis auto beams and then turning or diving is very, very helpful. And if you can stop a Corvette or another ship and get your double gun firepower on it, that's the way to go. And let me tell you, the Ballista, the Onager, and the Grenada, their whole deal is firepower. You have the longest range, highest spiking damage of any artillery cruiser. The Oberon cruisers have a little more DPS, and of course Akula Vector has decent spike, decent DPS, but they make up for it for their small hitbox and hull. You're kind of easy to hit as far as artillery cruisers go. You don't have much hull. You're pretty darn slow. And my philosophy is, of course, make yourself a little bit slower to get more damage resistant with slow and steady. But if you even the playing field and make other people slow and hit them with that impressive firepower, I can't tell you how many Corvettes I put down by freezing them and then bang, bang, done. 2 shots to the face, you're dead. On the other hand, you can go all offense, just do as much damage as you can, stay more than 8,000 meters away, between 8,000 and 8,600. Just do as much damage as you can and launch the bomb catapult to do even more damage at long range. And then when a Corvette comes up to you, you try in futility to fight them off with the machine guns, but you just accept your fate and die, respawn, and then launch more bomb catapults at long range, especially against TAC cruisers. Takes out their pods, takes out other artillery cruisers really good, and lets you focus on other targets. You can surprise people with them. It's pretty good. For flechettes are a little more impressive on the Ballista than any other ship because it gives you anti-Corvette firepower. It gives you anti-everything firepower at a decent range. It's not the best weapon out there, but right now, if you use proximity mines, they're still effective, but they're probably going to kill you. You don't have the hull to withstand your own proximity mine blast, and unless you use dive maneuver, which you can still do, proximity mines are a little more dangerous because you don't have the speed of Oberon to get away, and you don't have the hull of Akula Vector to absorb them. So flechettes is the way to go. Later on in Tier 4, proximity mines are deadly effective on Jupiter arms, but right now they're a little more dangerous. You can still use them, but they're a little more dangerous. I would go with flechettes. Stasis missile is good. You freeze a target, especially a destroyer, bang, bang, reload, bang, bang, they're dead. Very good. Drain missile, look, it's a Dreadnought or an annoying tactical cruiser. Okay, goodbye energy, and then you shoot them. Pretty darn good. So I highly recommend flechette missiles, but the other 3 are pretty good too. Stay away from light auto guns. They're not going to help you. Light auto guns, if a Corvette gets on you and you're not defensively built, light auto guns are not going to help you. Stay away from them. You have missile defense, which you will desperately need because everyone is going to start shooting you the minute you start putting heavy spike damage on enemy targets. Okay, so use the anti-missile defense or anti-nuke laser. Disruptor pulse. Okay, you disrupt a Jupiter Arms Corvette. It shoots you. You die. Same thing with Dreadnoughts. Disruptor pulse is less effective on the Ballista. So you really want anti-missile defense. It's going to help the most. Then we take a look at the internal modules. You start out with stationary cloak. That's pretty good. You can do better. I would recommend the dive maneuver. You have very poor mobility. So you want to get up, do the damage, find a good sniper position, bang, 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 do your damage, set your traps, launch your missiles, launch your bomb catapults. It pairs very well when a Corvette comes in. You can drop a proximity mine and dive before the proximity mine explodes. Very, very handy. You'll be using this tactic later in Tier 4 with another module, evasive maneuver. Stationary cloak, you don't have the speed to get away. People can kind of see the shimmer of it, but it's still worth using until you can get something better. But really the name of the game is dive maneuver for the Ballista. I don't know why it works better, but it just does. So you can use stasis auto beams or bomb catapult. You can actually use siege mode or rapid fire mode. It's better on this ship than other tier 3s. I highly recommend flechettes. I highly recommend dive maneuver. Proximity mines if you're using dive maneuver. Flechettes probably with cloak or dive maneuver just the same. And of course using missile defense. But the ballista's got the firepower. It really does. And speaking of which, I think I am going to give it to the ballista, because overall the Vucari, the Akula Vector line are solid artillery cruisers, hard to kill, hard to hit. You can never go wrong. The Virtus isn't there yet. Not enough modules to make the Oberon artillery cruiser build work. It just doesn't have it. And of course, the ballista is the first time that people who are used to tier 2, tier 1, oh, it's only artillery cruiser, I can take some damage. You do power to weapons and do a double hit with Jupiter Arms Ballista, you're going to start sinking some ships. It's got a lot of firepower. It's pretty fragile, pretty easy to take down. But overall, I have to give it to the ballista in tier 3. It's the first time people get to see that ship in action. It has a lot of shock value, and it's pretty savage. The ballista, back when there was tier 3 and tier 4 in veteran mode instead of tier 2, tier 3, the ballista was my go-to ship for taking out tier 4 ships. If there's a lot of tier 4 ships on the other team and I didn't have a tier 4 ship available to fight them, I pulled out the ballista and did solid damage. I still died a lot, but it really puts the damage out and hits way above its weight, as did tier 4 hit above its weight in tier 5 matches. So let's move on to tier 4, and we'll go back to Akula Vector, and now we have the tier 4 Mormets. And let me tell you, this is where Akula Vector starts to shine. Why? Well, let's get started with Desperate Measures. Desperate Measures is an officer briefing that is probably one of the staples of your collection. It works well on so many builds, and even though it was slightly nerfed, it is just really good. When you're about to die, Desperate Measures kicks in. It removes debuffs such as Disruptor Pulse or anything else like that. It gives you more energy. It reduces your module cooldowns by 20 seconds, and when you pair that with something like Retaliator, you're looking at using very key modules back to back and surviving nasty encounters. So just having this officer briefing is worth getting the Mormets, even if you don't like its playstyle. But what makes it so special? Well, Akula Vector finally gets its hands on Armored Lockdown, which is basically a watered-down version of Armored Amplifier. It gives you 80% damage resistance buff, and when you pair that with Slow and Steady and Engineering 101, you're looking at as close to as an invulnerable ship as you can get. It lasts for only 6 seconds, but for 6 seconds, if you start taking damage from a Corvette or a nuke is about to drop and you're out of shields, bang, Armored Lockdown. It has a 60-second cooldown, but if you have Retaliator up and you have Desperate Measures, you're now looking at something like a 20 or 30-second cooldown, which means you can use it almost back-to-back. There is some players that do like evasive maneuvers, and evasive maneuvers we're going to focus on a little more with other ships, and it basically every 4 seconds and later on every 3 seconds at tier 5 you can do a side shift, but the side shift isn't very pronounced with Akula Vector, so it's not quite as useful. It still is if you're a very highly trained and skilled captain, but I have to say the only thing that most captains want to be using on Akula Vector Mormets in tier 4 is the Armored Lockdown, and you're going to be using it in tier 5 on at least your primary or secondary build. It makes you so tanky. You already have so much hull, and you have decent speed. You put out decent firepower. Man, oh man, Armored Lockdown is the way to go. Dive Maneuver loses its luster because Evasive Maneuver is just better than Dive Maneuver. You can use it more often, and it's a little harder to hit when you're moving around so much. The cloaks, you can use Stationary Cloak. It is an effective means of escape, but at this point in the game, most captains prefer Armored Lockdown. Turn Amplifier is completely useless, as is Mobile cloak, don't use any of those modules. They are a waste of your time, especially turn amplifier. I know in some people's minds, hey, every half a minute I can turn rapidly and take out a Corvette. The Corvette does not care. It's going to outmaneuver you anyway, and on Oberon ships it's basically worthless. It makes you into a spinny top because your turn is already so good. Stick with armored lockdown unless you want to experiment with something really good. It makes Akula Vector really worth taking. Tier 4 and Tier 5 Akula Vector artillery cruisers are so much better than Tier 1, 2, or 3 because of armored lockdown and desperate measures. So what do we do for our secondary weapon? I still highly recommend the machine gun turrets, but you can continue to use the Tier 3 flak until you have nothing else left to upgrade. Then you can either upgrade to Tier 4 flak, but I highly recommend machine gun turrets 4. But let's face it, neither of these weapons are really going to help you out much if a Corvette gets a drop on you. You probably want to freeze them or mine them or do something and then turn and shoot them in the face if you can, or just die with dignity, respawn, and continue getting kills at long range. So, primary weapons. We have, of course, siege mode and rapid fire mode. They are both good if you build a build around them, but my experience is that they're just not as good as some of these other modules. You can make a cool rapid fire mode for all three of the artillery cruisers. They're worse on Oberon. Same thing with siege mode. You can put a lot of damage out with siege mode, but there's just better modules to use. So we still have our very capable, very standard issue bomb catapult. It does more damage, it has less cooldown, it throws more bombs, has a very excellent range. I would bring in bomb catapult into Tier 5 because it's good to have. It's a very solid, dependable, offensive based module. Stasis auto beams, same thing, a very solid defensive based module. But let me tell you, I think that disruptor auto beams are the way to go. I can't explain why, but they're just better. When you hit a Corvette with disruptor auto beams, my experience is they just really want to get out of there. They want to leave you alone. Most Corvettes don't want to deal with it. Very good Corvettes like Scroat, Persistent Flame, Mooks, Yulse, they'll ignore the disruption and try to fight you. But if you throw up armor amplifier, disrupt them, throw out mines, let me tell you, most Corvettes don't want anything to do with you. They would rather go pick on someone else. It's a deterrent. But more than a deterrent, disruptor auto beams will take away armor amplifier on a Dreadnought that gets too close, or they'll even take away the ram of an Oberon destroyer trying to ram you. If you see them coming, activate your disruptor auto beams, and remember, they last for a good 80 seconds with only a 30-second cooldown. If you even see enemy Oberon destroyers or Corvettes in the vicinity, even if they haven't focused you yet, throw on your disruptor auto beams and annoys the piss out of them, and they'll want to leave you alone and get out of the area very, very quickly. Or you can actually disable a Dreadnought or a destroyer's primary means of dealing damage or primary means of doing whatever shenanigans they want to do. It's very effective. I'm not downplaying stasis. I used to use stasis a lot, but disruptor is the way to go. Rupture Catalyst. This is a really cool module. If you're Dreadnought hunting, you want Rupture Catalyst. It's very specific and it makes you offensively minded, but it takes away armor amplification from Dreadnoughts and tactical cruisers. You rupture them and then you let them have it. So it's a really good module. I would pick it up. It got better and I think it's still really good. Here we have a replacement for bomb catapult, Sentry Catapult. Not as directly damaging as bomb catapult, but Sentry Catapult is really good against other artillery cruisers, other tactical cruisers. It flushes people out of cover. It creates pandemonium and havoc whenever you launch them. It usually doesn't get you a kill. Sometimes it does, but even Revenite and a lot of other really good artillery cruiser captains use Sentry Pod to disrupt other enemy artillery cruisers or to create havoc on the battlefield. Very effective, worth picking up and experimenting with. And now we have Mine Catapult. Mine Catapult is a little different than Bomb Catapult. Bomb Catapult you see coming, but it does solid, predictable damage. Mine Catapult is very hard to see coming, but they're very hard to hit with. Mine Catapults are really, really good against tactical cruisers because tactical cruisers tend to stay near dreadnoughts and command ships or try to stay near their pods. If you launch Mine Catapults near their pods or the targets they're trying to heal, they run into them all the time. Sometimes you get a lucky kill with them with corvettes, but usually they're not as consistent as bomb catapults. But when you're dealing with a heal ball, a very defensively minded team, Mine Catapults does even more damage than bomb catapults. And bomb catapults, some of the bombs miss or scatter. Mine Catapults gives you a nice little cluster of mines that's hard to see, and when someone runs into them and it does 40,000 damage to them, it's very hard to mitigate that damage. So you have a huge selection in Tier 4 of really, really good offensive and defensive modules, and they'll just get better. So it's about your play style, really. Now, as far as status effect missiles, Drain now does 80, but it's still a little nerfed. Now we have Stasis. Stasis is still pretty good if you're trying to freeze targets to shoot them. Now we have Scramble Missile. Scramble Missile's okay, but it just doesn't do it. It sows confusion so you can get away, maybe. Or it disorients a target far away. But if you're going to do a status effect missile, I would rather do Stasis or Drain. Flechettes just lose their luster in Tier 4 and Tier 5. They're just not worth taking anymore. And now we have Stasis Mines. Stasis Mines. If you're going to mine something, why don't you kill it? If something is near you, why freeze it? It's just going to shoot you some more. I really don't like Stasis Mines. I rarely see anyone use them. If you're going to use mines, use proximity mines. They now do 12,000 damage. And now you can use Armor Amplifier, or you can use Evasive Maneuver to get out of range of these mines or absorb the firepower. Let me tell you, it's so good as a Morimetz. Someone gets the drop on you, you get Disruptor Auto Beams, disrupt them so they can't boost away, drop a mine in their face, and then wait 1001, 1002, about 2 seconds for the mines to deploy, and then you use Armored Lockdown to absorb the firepower where the corvettes can't. It's very, very effective. Now you have so many means in which to get out of range or absorb the firepower of proximity mines, so they're very useful in Tier 4, Tier 5. But if you're more offensively minded, you have either Stasis Missile or Drain Missile. The rest I would honestly leave behind. As far as your proximity modules, you have anti-nuke lasers, are very effective. Anti-missile lasers, if you want a little more anti-missile firepower, they're closer range but 3 turrets firing. The cooldown on both of these is still atrocious. Duration's okay. It's gone up, but it's still pretty atrocious. But nothing takes care of nukes like anti-nuke lasers, and they work on everything else, and they have a very good range. 25-second duration is long enough to get one nuke or one enemy salvo out of your hair. Very long cooldown, but not as recommended as anti-missile pulse. This is my go-to anti-missile module. I save my shields for nukes. You get to use this every 20 seconds, and you fly around a little to get those big corvette missile or torpedo volleys or ship torpedo or missile volleys. You get them to where they're almost about to hit you, fire off the pulse. It gets even better in Tier 5. Even better. 20-second cooldown is still very manageable. With a Kula Vector, if you have Retaliator or Desperate Measures up, that's going to do it for you right there. Anti-missile pulse will take care of an entire corvette torpedo salvo or an entire destroyer or dreadnought missile salvo in one button press, and it'll be available for use very soon. I love anti-missile pulse. I can't say enough good things about it. But if you want to be a little more offensively or defensive minded, you now have Stasis Pulse. So you have Disruptor Auto Beams. Disruptor Pulse isn't very good. It's not as good as Disruptor Auto Beams, but now you have Stasis Pulse. So if you want to throw caution to the wind and you want to use your shields for missiles and nukes, you can use offensive things such as status effect missiles or mines, or you can use Disruptor Auto Beams and still have a means of freezing enemy corvettes with Stasis Pulse. Very good. Light auto guns now have a 1600 meter range. They do over 1,000 per second, 4 turrets firing. Very good refire rate. Very atrocious cooldown. I still don't recommend them, but if you want to try the Porcupine build with damage auto beams, which I really didn't get into before, damage auto beams, they do damage instead of disrupting or stasis enemy targets that are hit with the beams. Damage auto beams, they have a 1500 meter range. They do 700 damage a second with a half a second refire time. 3 turrets firing, exceptional duration, good cooldown. In my opinion, not as effective as stasis or disruptor auto beams, but when paired with light auto guns, both of those can do a good amount of damage for a Porcupine build. So you can give that a try if you want, but I really recommend the anti-missile pulse to just deal with all sorts of missiles and torpedoes. Stasis pulse for corvettes, anti-nuke lasers. You can use your status effect missiles such as drain missile or stasis missile. I wouldn't use scramble missile. I wouldn't use flechettes, but you should be using proximity mines. And then, of course, you want to be using armored lockdown, and that makes the Mormets so very tanky. You can even experiment with reinforced to give you even more hull, making sure you survive long enough to use your second armored lockdown, along with retaliator and desperate measures. Just a fine, solid ship that can now truly be called the tank of artillery cruisers. Now let's take a look at Jupiter Arms, and Jupiter Arms now has the bigger brother of the ballista, and that would be the Onager. Now, not much changes with Jupiter Arms. I'm not going to cut them short. You really don't want to be using armored lockdown. You can. You start out with mobile cloak, and that's not so good. So you really want to upgrade either to armored lockdown, which isn't as preferred as evasive maneuver. If you brought dive maneuver with you from tier 3, which I highly recommend, the Onager still has a means to deploy mines or to duck under cover and get out of trouble. But as soon as you can, I would go with evasive maneuver. Now, if you like dive maneuver, its cooldown is now only 10 seconds long. That's pretty darn good, but then you have to slowly climb back up to altitude. Evasive maneuver in tier 4 and in tier 5 is really the way to go for Jupiter Arms artillery cruisers. There is something to be said about dive maneuver and armored lockdown, but most captains, I'm talking 90% of captains for Jupiter Arms, in tier 4, tier 5 use evasive maneuvers, so you should get used to using it. And in tier 5, it has only a 3-second cooldown. You probably want to use anti-missile pulse, but if you want to throw caution to the wind, you can use anti-nuke lasers or you can use stasis pulse. It's pretty darn effective, less effective than a Kula Vector. I would go with the anti-missile pulse, especially against Corvette torpedo salvos or missile salvos. Anti-missile pulse takes care of it. It's out of your hair. You don't have to think about it. And then you have evasive maneuver to buy you more time to use the anti-missile pulse or to get you out of way of problems or to dodge other artillery cruisers. Now with evasive maneuvers, the Onager is really good with proximity mines, but if it's too much of a dangerous game to you, you can be more offensively minded and use stasis missile or drain missile. I wouldn't recommend scramble. Flechette missiles, not very good anymore. And of course, you have stasis mine, never use it. And for more offense-based, you can go with sentry catapult, the classic bomb catapult, the very good mine catapult if you're fighting a defensively minded team or heel ball. You can still use siege mode pretty darn effectively. You can use tier 3 siege mode if you don't have a better one from tier 3. It does damage, it makes you stationary, but being stationary isn't a big problem with the Onager, especially if you have evasive maneuvers, because evasive maneuvers, you can still use it even if you're stationary. So you can use siege mode, snap off high-powered shots, dodge out of the way. There's better modules, like I said before, at the Mormets. For defensive-minded captains, you still have stasis or the highly recommended disruptor auto beams. Let me tell you, disruptor auto beams, proximity mines, anti-missile pulse, and evasive maneuvers is a very solid build. or you can have a secondary or primary build with bomb or mine catapults, sentry catapults. Rapid fire doesn't work as good. You activate rapid fire, you're basically going to get 2 back-to-back shots with the onager, and that kind of pairs well with survival instinct. Survival instinct is a really good officer briefing. I use it on a lot of dreadnoughts, believe it or not. But basically, the more damage you take, the faster you reload. So if you're reloading faster, taking damage, and you're using rapid fire, that's a pretty solid build to get 4 shots back to back, maybe even 6. But it drains your energy. Siege mode makes you stationary. It does a lot of damage, but people see it coming. Really, you're already doing so much damage with the onager already. So why not think defensively minded? If you are going to be offensively minded, use a catapult. So that's about it with the onager. The onager is still pretty darn good, but people have lost the element of surprise. The ballista can bully tier 2 ships. And people who haven't experienced a ballista are just shocked when you do power to weapons, bang, bang, reload, bang, bang. So much damage, they're not used to it, but in tier 4, the onager is a little less effective. It has less of a shock value. People are used to seeing it. They are kind of squishy. They don't have the king range of the Grenada yet. They don't do as much damage as the Grenada. They're still a good ship. I used it even when fighting against tier 5 ships. It's still a very, very effective means of doing damage to the enemy. You can stay at a long range, relatively safe, dump offensive catapult modules on the enemy, or think defensively, set mine traps, use stasis or disruptor auto beams, anti-missile pulse, evasive maneuver, and if you don't like evasive maneuver, armored lockdown. Still a very solid long-range damage spiking ship. Now we're going to take a look at Oberon in tier 4, and that means we are going to be talking about the Nox. The Nox is a solid ship for Oberon. Now it has more survivability options, but it's just not the Stabia, and we'll get into that later. It's a little slower. It fires a little quicker, but doesn't do nearly enough damage, and it has not very good hull. But it has glass cannon, and that in and of itself is worth researching the Nox, because glass cannon is a staple artillery cruiser officer briefing. I think Desperate Measures is really good defensively, and I still think Destruction Cascade is probably one of the best offensively for artillery cruisers, but glass cannon is really good. A little less good in Onslaught because assault ships will be pinging away at you, but if you can avoid taking damage, you can just have this passive 20% weapon boost, and if you put power to weapons, you're doing damage and a half. It's really strong. Get glass cannon, experiment with it. You'll love glass cannon on artillery cruisers and even corvettes. You probably also want the machine gun turrets, but you really want navigation expert to make use of the Nox. If you can't get navigation expert, the Nox is just not a Stabia. It's a little lackluster. It still has good maneuverability, but it doesn't have the damage. It just doesn't have the damage. So you can do the same thing you did with the Virtus bomb catapult from a flank. You can use stasis auto beams, disruptor auto beams, mine catapult. Stay away from siege mode. Stay away from rapid fire mode. They sound good on paper, but being stationary or losing all your energy is awful. You don't want that. Stay away from scramble missile. Stay away from stasis mines. Flechettes, you can use them if you want. You come with them. They're okay. They're a placeholder, but they're not as good as proximity mines. You can really use proximity mines very effectively in the Nox, or you can use a stasis missile. And stasis missile is great because you can freeze enemy targets and then shoot them at long range, or use stasis missile to hit someone closing in and get away. You can use drain missile, but really you can use speed to use proximity mines very effectively. Anti-missile pulse is really handy because you can just stay barely out of range and outrun missiles and then use anti-missile pulse as soon as it gets off cooldown. Or, of course, use it on torpedo salvos, especially from corvettes. Stasis pulse, again, you can stasis pulse a Corvette and fly away fairly quickly while shooting them from your back arc, because remember, your guns are 360 degrees. Or you can use anti-missile or anti-nuke lasers. I wouldn't recommend disruptor pulse. I highly recommend armored lockdown. Sure, you're not a tank like a Kula Vector, but for 6 seconds you can get close to invulnerability, which is something you really need because you're so squishy, and it buys you 6 seconds to get out of dodge or deploy proximity mines or to just get something done when fighting a Corvette. A lot of captains used to use evasive maneuvers with the Nox to just be totally crazy, do these really crazy maneuvers where you're flying fast forward or backward, up and down, and using evasive maneuver to fishtail. And it looks really cool, but only the best shots can be offensive while doing this defensive technique. So while it's a lot of fun to use, it's very, very hard to keep your pipper on target. So I recommend armored lockdown with Oberon. Try evasive maneuver, try dive. If, like me, you don't like those two, go with armored lockdown. But as far as tier 4, which you are the underdog in legendary mode, the Nox, you want to get through it as quick as possible to get to the Stabia. It's not competitive enough. It's too squishy, doesn't put out the damage. You can survive in it through clever use of the map and strategy, and it will do fine. And it has a really good officer briefing, but I would rush through it as quick as possible and just get to the Stabia. As far as a Kula Vector goes in tier 4, it's just a better version of the Vukari. It has everything you want, and it has armored lockdown, more armor, more firepower at 7,000 meters. It's just really good. It got a small damage buff, very small hitbox. It's got to be the best for tier 4. The Moramets can survive legendary mode shenanigans and deal very, very good damage at tier 4. Be very competitive. I highly recommend the Moramets for tier 4. That's not to say that Jupiter Arms isn't good in tier 4. I actually think they're better than Oberon. The Onager, if played right at long range and with a good supporting team, can put out savage damage. But it's squishy. Tier 5 Corvettes and Destroyers are going to eat you alive, so you have to accept that. You can still do excellent damage and make good use of cover in the map to stay at long range and do very well in the Onager, but you're going to die a few times because you're just squishy and you don't put out the damage of the Grenada. Now let's look at tier 5, and in tier 5 let's jump right back into a Kula Vector and we get to the Svalrog. Now, man, the Svalrog is a solid ship, just like previous tiers. It's basically a bigger, badder Moramets. It has a little more hull, it's slightly slower, it's got a little more firepower, it got buffed recently as well, and it plays the same trick. It's very hard to hit. You want to be going up and down while you're shooting, strafing up and down. It's got a decent turn radius. You use armored lockdown to give it very good survivability. You probably want to be using desperate measures. You can even use reinforced. You probably want to use disruptor auto beams if someone closes in on you with disruptor auto beams. If it's a destroyer, you take away the ram. If it's a Corvette, you take away their whole game. If it's a Dreadnought, you take away armored lockdown. Very, very good. But instead of using disruptor auto beams, you can also use bomb catapult, mine catapult, or you can use sentry catapult. And you can also experiment with siege mode, rapid fire mode, or rupture catalyst. Really, the Svalrog can use the whole gambit of offensively or defensively based primary modules. It works really good with proximity mines because you have just enough speed to get away, or you can pop armored lockdown, survive your own proximity mine, and kill Corvettes in a tier 5. Proximity mines 5 is 14,400 damage. Really, really good. Only an 8-second cooldown, and this is why reinforced with the Svalrog is pretty good. When you have disruptor auto beams, they last so long. All the auto beams last so long. The cooldown's only 25 seconds now. plus 20% of that brings you to 30 seconds. That's pretty darn good. 20% to proximity mines brings it to 10 seconds. Adding 20% to anti-missile pulse brings it to 17 seconds. Really reinforced brings this Valrog to really thick armored hull. And then you put, of course, armored lockdown on top of that. Makes you extremely survivable. Very solid ship. Now, as far as anything new, we have the bolt gun turrets. I love bolt gun turrets. Some people want to use the machine guns at close range. Flak is kind of not cutting it in Tier 5, but bolt gun turrets don't have the damage that machine gun turrets have up to 1,600 meters, but 1,600 meters isn't very good. It's not very far reaching. Destroyers, dreadnoughts, just about everything can kill you outside of that range, and corvettes can pop in and out of that range, and you're not doing enough damage to them. But bolt gun turrets you can use at long range. You can use at 7,000 meters. You can fire your main gun at 7,000 meters, fire bolt guns once at 7,000 meters, switch back because your reload will be done, fire your main gun, and just alternate between the two while strafing up and down. It adds to your damage, and bolt guns are 360 degrees and do 896 DPS at close range, which isn't quite as good as 2,000 DPS as the machine gun turrets, but you're still doing damage at close range at under 1,200 meters against corvettes, and it's actually pretty darn handy, and they refire pretty quick and have a pretty good reload time. It's worth taking and experimenting with. If you don't like it, go back to machine gun turrets, but I really like the bolt gun turrets. I really do, especially on this Valrog. I have a good rhythm with Valrog and bolt gun turrets. I highly recommend it. A solid ship, this Valrog. You can't go wrong, but it's basically a Tier 5 Morimetz. Now let's get to the Grenada for Jupiter Arms. And in Jupiter Arms, you have such a colossal increase in damage, plus you're semi-auto now, so you can space the shots out. It takes a little getting used to, and if you want the same rapid-fire back-to-back shots, you're going to have to jam on that trigger, but you're doing so much damage, you're still very squishy. You're still very slow. So you want to use Armored Lockdown, or you want to use especially recommended Evasive Maneuver 5, 3-second cooldown, jumping back and forth. You're so hard to hit, and if someone gets behind you, you can turn while using Evasive Maneuver and do these nice fishtail patterns. And of course, Evasive Maneuver can help you with your aim. Because your turn radius isn't so good, with Jupiter Arms with the Grenada, you can fire, reposition if someone ducks in cover. You can evasive maneuver while climbing to get a better angle on them. I highly recommend evasive maneuver as long as you stay above 7,000 meters from your target. You can now one-shot so many ships with the Grenada, especially with glass cannon or destruction cascade. You put power to weapons. You can one-shot the Nox. You can one-shot the Kataro. You can one-shot, of course, the Onager. If under certain conditions with rupture or with beam amplifier, you can basically one-shot Oberon artillery cruisers. You can two-shot, and by two-shot I mean firing both barrels twice. Under the right conditions, you can double shot. That's 4 hits, 2 shots, and Jupiter Arms destroyer. That's really darn good. This thing is really powerful. It's the king of damage spike. It's not going to be my most highest recommended artillery cruiser, but it's still so solid. Like the Valrog, once you go down the Jupiter Arms philosophy, it will reward your philosophy with supreme firepower at supreme range. You're still squishy, but you can get around it with evasive maneuver, with the armored lockdown, with anti-missile defenses. You can use proximity mines, and of course you can use defensive auto beams or offensive catapults. It's a really good ship, but it's really your primary guns. I like to use the bolt guns with the Grenada as well, but it's really hard to switch back and forth to time it right, and it's very distracting. So you can use machine guns too, but bolt guns are pretty good. But overall, the Grenada rewards the philosophy of long-range firepower for Jupiter arms, and it's highly recommended you go defensive with the Grenada. You're already doing so much damage at long range. Go defensive. With the Svalrog, it rewards the tankiness of a Kula Vector. Another solid ship. You're doing average, decently long-range damage. You're so hard to hit, so survivable. The Svalrog just does it. But it's not my top pick for Tier 5. My top pick is the final calumniation, the final journey for the Furia through the Stabia. Yes, the Stabia for Oberon is the fast flanking artillery cruiser. It finally has the speed. It finally has just enough hull to be survivable, and it finally has rocking firepower. This ship has rocking DPS. It really throws the shots out there. Very forgiving for aim. It's got 8 rounds in the clip. If you miss the first couple, you can slightly adjust your aim and put shots on target. If you hit with all 8 shots, you're getting probably around 14,000 damage. It's got a decently quick reload. And of course, it's so freaking fast. Really, really good. If you want to fishtail and go crazy, you can use evasive maneuvers and do crazy maneuvers and be exceptionally hard to hit. But I recommend, since you already have the speed and the turn rate, to use armored lockdown, so that even though you're squishy, when a Corvette or a nuke comes down upon you, you have an answer for it in your back pocket. No need to worry. I also highly recommend anti-missile pulse, but if you want to help your friends out, you can fly around in a circle around your friends and use anti-nuke lasers very effectively. You can also sneak up on ships, use stasis pulse and drop a mine, or if a ship is chasing you, you can use stasis pulse and get away. I don't recommend disruptor pulse or light auto guns, and of course you can use status effect missiles just like any other artillery cruiser to go and either freeze a target or drain a target. And of course you have proximity mines. You can even use stasis mines with the Stabia to provide a means of stasis if you want to use anti-missile pulse or disruptor beams. You can throw caution to the wind and use stasis mines and just slow targets down around you and dance around them and do the firepower, or proximity mines to kill them. As far as your primary module goes, man oh man, you can do the auto beams. They're a really good answer. Stasis auto beams, very effective. Disruptor auto beams, not so much damage auto beams. You want to stay away from rapid fire mode, and you want to stay away from siege mode, because you never want to slow down in the Stabia. You want to have navigation expert, and you want to be power to engines the entire time, moving up, moving down, moving side, flanking the enemy, and launching either mine catapults, bomb catapults, or sentry catapults. You can literally flank the enemy when they're hiding behind those big dunes or big plateaus in Red Sands, or in Elysium behind the hills, or in Amarani behind the central station. You can sneak on the side of the map while firing the entire time, and then get a beat on those hard to get hiding ships that are damaged, or tactical cruisers. Get a beat on them where other artillery cruisers can't, and launch bomb catapults, mine catapults, or sentry catapults so effectively. But you never want to stop moving. You want to be able to run away when they finally get sick of your shenanigans. You want to be able to dive with power to engines, so you don't really need the dive maneuver module. You can just do it on your own with your speed. You can also experiment with nerves of steel to boost your speed. But I highly recommend using navigation expert and flying around the map, moving up and down, flanking, using offensively based modules, and then when someone closes in on you, you could cloak, or you could use armored lockdown, and that's very, very effective. You can use anti-missile pulse, or you can stasis pulse and get away. You can use stasis mines, but highly recommend proximity mines, or use stasis missile or drain missile. So many options, so much flexibility, but not at the expense of firepower. The Nox has all these tactical, strategic, flexible things it can use, but it just doesn't have the firepower. The Stabia has the firepower. Bolt guns, Really cool with the Stabia. You can fire them while on the move at things at medium range in between reloads, because you never want to be at close range in the Stabia, ever. So you can use machine guns, but I think bolt guns are more flexible for you. But if you don't want to spend the points on bolt guns, machine guns are a good answer, and even flak. But you start with machine guns 4, so you can stick with machine guns 4 for a very, very long time. So overall in Tier 5, the Stabia, I've had so many fun matches in the Stabia. Sure, I have a couple of really good matches with the Grenada where I get 25 kills, 24, 23 kills, 1 or no deaths. But I've also had matches where I get my ass kicked in the Grenada. When 3 Corvettes come for you, it's really hard to survive. In the Stabia, you can survive. In the Stabia, you can flank. Basically, I have those really good 22 kill no death matches, 23 kill no death matches in the Stabia, but I also have consistent 13-0, 14-1, 15-2 matches in the Stabia. It's consistent, flexible, has the firepower. It's very, very squishy, but it has the speed to get out of the problems that you encounter. But I'm never, ever, in this category for artillery cruisers, I'm never, ever going to sell the other 2 companies short. Because if you want long-range firepower, the Grenada won't let you down. If you want tankiness, survivability, grittiness, the Svalrog will never let you down. And it has quite a kick, too, as far as firepower. But I really, really have to give it to the Stabia. The Stabia is everything the Nox and the Virtus wish they could be, but it finally does it right. So if you're an Oberon fan, hang in there to the Stabia. If you're an Akula Vector fan, be tanky, but be okay with the fact that you may be disappointed with your overall DPS and kill count. But you're in there for the survivability, and if you're Jupiter Arms, get ready for high kill counts one match and then getting your ass kicked the next. Well, I think that wraps it up on artillery cruisers. I think we'll do tactical cruisers next and save corvettes to last. Well, that's it from me for now, and I'll see you soon in Sinley Bay.